But tonight I have a very, very, very a guy that I've respected for many, many years, going back to about 1995. A guy called Richard Rose, and all I can say is he's been an inspiration to me, and I'm sure he's been an inspiration to many, many people. And I really do feel that we owe a lot to people like Richard Rose, especially because of how much work and effort they've put in to what we're all trying to do to enlighten people around the globe about what cannabis and what cannabis hemp is. Richard, thank you for coming on my show tonight. It's a real privilege to speak to you. Yeah? If there is an A-list in the hemp world, I certainly think that you deserve to be there. Yeah. As I said before, you've been an inspiration to me. I've actually met you personally, I think, twice. The first time was around 1998, the Natural Products Show in Earl's Court. And
yes, right.
Yeah, man. No, it was.
Oh, an Olympia Center.
It was the Olympia Center.
Right,
yeah?
right.
We did do the Brighton one after that, I believe, but at that particular point in time, I was involved in textiles. I had a hemp shop. I just started to really learn about the hemp seed oil and hemp seed and the nutrition of it. And I remember coming up and saw your stall at the Olympia, by the way, for people who don't know, is one of the big conference centres of the world, certainly of England, certainly of the world. And Richard, what he had on his stall was just amazing, you know, for that time. You know, I'm taking it back 1998, 1997, which is somewhere around there. Yeah.
Yeah, probably 97 or so. In 96, I started importing shelled hemp seed. You know, the whole hemp seed, but we take the shell off, so it's shelled hemp seed. I called it hemp nut, I did that in North America and Canada, legal labels up in Canada, starting in 96. But starting back in 94, I had started making cheese, Hemprella cheese, and Hempe burger, a tempeh burger with 10% hemp seed in it. And was selling that throughout North America. It was frozen and perishable distribution in natural food stores. And then did the hemp nut. And, you know, I fell in love with shelled hemp seed. So I created basically a whole company around the brand, Hemp Nut Incorporated. We had 15 products at its peak, things like cookies and bar and ice cream mix, the cheese, hemp seed oil, lip balm, things like that.
Yeah. Well, one of the whole range was so. There was also some crisps there, you know, like healthy crisps.
Right. Blue corn chips.
The blue corn chips, yeah. I got through packaged though. But one of the things that really stood out was the hemp nut burger, because I remember serving that up to a third generation beef farmer in Cornwall, who vegetarian and veganism just didn't exist in his world. And I served it up to him at a thing we'd done down there. And he ate it and he just looked at me and said, "My God," he said, I've never tasted anything like it. He said, "This is almost as good as my hamburger, beef burger thing." Anyway, look, Richard, take it away, because you tell people what you do, please. Thank you.
No worries. So for 8 years, well, starting back in 1980, so 35 years ago, I started making tofu from soybeans and ended up making about 140 different foods from tofu and soy milk and tempeh over the next 6 years, settling on Tofu-rella cheese. And then did that, was on the Inc. 500 fastest growing companies. They had big distribution in supermarkets in Canada and the US. And then discovered that hemp seed was almost as high in protein as soybean, and it was a lot better quality protein. So I started shifting my focus from the soybean to hemp seed, and that was in about 93, and then worked on it for a while and came up with these two. You know, I had Tofu-rella, Hemprella was a natural line extension. And then the Hempe burgers, we introduced them in September of 94 at the Natural Food Trade Show in Baltimore, Natural Products Expo. And we were mobbed the whole time. We were like right at the very entrance to it. And that kicked it off, and then started the Hemp Food Association to help other food companies incorporate hemp seed into their foods. And at its peak, we had about 50 global members. They started that in 1998. And I've actually reactivated that a couple weeks ago. If you go to Facebook, you'll actually find Hemp Food Association again. So wonderful. I'm going to do that some more. Right now I'm doing Medicinal Hemp Association, which I've been doing just about a year now. That was started, CBD companies asked me to advocate on their behalf because I kept standing up to bullies for them. And so I did. The Fiber Group went after them, and I stood up to them. And so now I run the Medicinal Hemp Association to advocate and promote CBD, as well as work on policy issues, trying to get it legal at the national level when hemp becomes legal, so that the other 90% of the hemp industry, that being cannabinoids, can become legalized along with the fiber and the seed.
I just want to listen to you. I find it very difficult to even ask you any questions because I sort of know you and I've seen what you've done. And to try and explain to the audience, I mean, think of these days that Richard's putting out. We're talking 1994, 1993, 1997. Now, I know there's been an upsurgence just recently due to the medical side of the cannabis plant. But people like Richard have just been pumping it out there for so long, and the nutritional side of the oil and the seed is just so important. How it feeds the body, let alone this CBD side.
Right. So, today, if I were to do today what I did 21 years ago, everything would be the same, except everything would have the inclusion of CBD in it. So our burger would also have 25 milligrams CBD per serving, things like that. Is that possible, actually, Richard? But the 411 on hemp seed is that it's about a third complete protein, very high quality globulin protein, which is edestin and albumin. They're considered extremely high quality, efficient proteins. And it's about 10% omega-3. And between the protein and the omega-3, it's arguably the most nutritious seed on earth. It has more protein than meat, and it has more omega-3 than fish. When you make foods with that, they're naturally, they taste better because the shelled hemp seed itself tastes like pine nuts or sunflower seeds. So it has another sort of nutty, savory note added to the food. It always tastes better. And now if we start adding another hemp product, CBD, we will also help people with inflammation and prevent cancer and things like that.
Just taking that back to the fish industry, I've always believed that, from reading stuff from Lynn Osborne and stuff from yourself and some other people back in the day, that the polysaturated chain, if I've got that right, is the perfect match for the body. But the fish industry seems to say that it's not. And I've come up against the fish industry many, many times and tried to explain to them or ask them, really not to explain to them, to actually ask them why they think that the fish oil is better for the human consumption than from a seed, or the hemp seed. And they seem to feel that the hemp seed it's not long enough in its chain or something. Can you explain that a little bit more to us? I can't really. I mean, the fish industry is going to pull some wild stuff out of their butt and use it as an excuse. So I can't really speak to that. You'll have to ask them. The fish oil is high in omega-3. It's a different form. It's a more refined form. To get from the seed in the omega-3 in flax or hemp seed, you need an enzyme. Some people might be lacking that enzyme. That could be the kind of thing they're looking at. But at the end of the day, hemp seed, you're not going to find all the mercury that you're finding in fish oil today. Exactly. So there's, and it also, some of us don't want to taste fish burps every time we take fish oil. So it has its downside as well.
And I should mention, in the interest of good marketing, I have two cookbooks. Hemp Nut Cookbook talks about all this stuff. It has all the nutritional information that hadn't been published before, and historical. We were able to document the first in the literature in China 5,000 years ago, the first documentation of use of hemp seed as a food. It was one of the 5 royal grains.
Wow. Now, Richard, taking you back to your first book, one of the things, a fabulous book as well. I think I still have the original copy that I got from you at the show back in '97 when you signed it. But one of the things that I really loved about that, I think it was at the end of the book, you actually gave a recipe for the Chinese. They'd done like a hemp tofu. Yeah. Yeah,
there's pictures in the first edition, the yellow one, of a villager a Miao villager in the hills of Cambodia making tofu from hemp seed milk in a large vessel, and he added fennel greens, as I recall, and that probably did the coagulation. Hemp seed protein is such a nice protein to work with compared to soybean, in that the isoelectric point, the point at which it'll curd and the proteins will cling together, and you'll make tofu or cheese or whatever, is so much lower than soybean, and it's a much tighter curd than soybean even. It's a much more of a joy to work with than soybean.
I've also heard as well, through working in this industry now, that soybean is not actually quite so good for you. And also I know from farmers in India that they're sort of growing the Monsanto sort of style of soybean, that if you compared the two, just as growing, that the hemp is a much nicer, much kinder crop to grow in the soil than soya. I believe soya is quite harsh on the soil, and it takes quite a lot to keep it alive.
Well, soybean is called a nitrogen fixer. So the roots in soybean will actually add nitrogen into the soil. So it makes a good rotation crop for that reason. But the protein in soybean is called a structured protein. It's not globular or globulin like the hemp seed protein, which is the kind that's found in our blood. The protein one would find in the blood is all globular. None of it is structured. So soybean has to undergo an additional step to break it down into something more assimilable for the body. It has that downside, as well as it has anti-nutritional factors, oligosaccharides, and trypsin inhibitors, which the hemp seed doesn't have. Soybean you cannot eat raw. It has to be processed. Hemp seed you could, in fact, eat raw.
Yeah. Also, I'm going to take you back as well. You saying about the nitrogen fix from soya. As a hemp farmer and knowing the agriculture of it, hemp is also a nitrogen fixer.
Maybe. I haven't seen that. But soybean is the only plant that I know of that is a nitrogen fixer that adds nitrogen back in. It has to do with some nodes on the roots.
Yeah. As I say, I can most probably put up documents to say that hemp will also do what soya does to the land, but actually does it better. But that's a different conversation. That's more of an agricultural one. So where are you at the moment, Richard? I mean, I know that you sort of. I remember I was importing some of your stuff into England. It was fantastic stuff, and you was getting very, very big. I know you were through a lot of stores, and you was exporting, and then all of a sudden it all sort of collapsed, didn't it? It just sort of.
Yes, the market died for 2.5 years. A fiber group, Hemp Industries Association, that I was a shareholder, director, officer, certification manager, and chair of the Food and Oil Committee, against my wishes, decided to sue DEA when DEA had done what, to my mind, was the first step in legalizing. And they sued, and all the retailers freaked out and dropped the products nationwide because they were afraid DEA was going to raid their store any second because of our cheese. And so the market for hemp foods nationwide died. You can see that in the production statistics following that in Canada as well as in Europe. It takes a major dip in 2001 through 2004, and almost dies in Canada, in fact. I mean, like down to like 5% of its previous peak, or lower even. And so when that happened, I had just sold the cheese company and decided to retire, and I moved over your way to Amsterdam for 4 years.
Uh-huh. Yeah, because I certainly found that in Europe, I was just getting involved in that side of things. So I was coming more from the fabric side, and it was just like, oh God, I was so excited. There was all this wonderful food coming out from you. There was other stuff that was happening, and all of a sudden, just as I thought it was about to happen back in '94, it just went boom. And it was all over this DEA and the hemp nut, and was it a nut, and was it legal? And it just seemed to destroy it overnight, over nothing.
Yeah, no, it wasn't over nothing. They were trying to build a legalization industry. They were trying to develop a vote hemp so that they could you could solicit donations and have a real organization devoted to legalization. However, they were not, it was not their cross to bear. It wasn't their burden for compliance. It was mine. And if I said I can comply with this is actually good news, the people who don't have to comply should listen to that. But they didn't want to. They wanted to ignore it and develop a whole us versus them sort of, big bad government cracking down. It was actually the first step in DEA's first attempt, I believe, at them to actually get rid of some of cannabis regulation.
Wow, yeah. That's quite amazing. Hello, Dr. Beth. Yeah, we got Dr. Beth online as well. Would you like to step in and talk, Dr. Beth?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Listeners, Steve was wonderful, and he prepared me for this interview. He said, when Richard starts to speak, let him speak. And listeners, if you have to pause for a moment and go back to and re-listen to some of this, go ahead and do this, because this is so interesting. Richard, thank you for sharing this with us. Richard, we do have a question. And home cultivation, that has been, at least in the cannabis forefront, has been a significant factor in passage in states. With that being said, and with the new hemp laws being said, what are your hopes for home cultivation of hemp? I mean, we think about the clarification and the cleaning of the environment, all of these wonderful things. And personally, I hate grass. I would love to grow hemp in the back. So please, would you elaborate on that?
Sure, I'd love to. You have to understand that right now in 4 states, recreational marijuana is actually more legal than hemp to grow. That's how screwed up it is here and how upside down. So technically in the state of Colorado, if I want to grow 1 hemp plant, I have to pay $500 plus $2 an acre. So $502 to grow that 1 hemp plant. I can grow 4 flowering females for $0 registration if it were marijuana. So, but what people I think will do in the future in terms of growing hemp is I believe people will grow it and just not register. And I think at some point they'll just stop requiring registration. And at that point, what people have choices, it's not about growing